And now, to introduce our 2 o'clock Interfaith Lecture Series here in the Hall of Philosophy, where this week we are presenting the theme, Falling Upward, a Week with Father Richard Rohr. Our distinguished guest today is, once again, thank God, indeed, Father Richard Rohr. Father Richard needs no introduction, as the overwhelming numbers of all of you who have traveled here from all over the country to sit at his feet will attest. For the recordings, however, and for those who will enjoy the recordings in the future, I will just say a few words about the core of Father Richard's life. Father Richard is a globally recognized ecumenical teacher who bears witness to the universal awakening within Christian mysticism and the Perennial Tradition. He is a Franciscan priest of the New Mexico province and founder of the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Father Richard's teaching is grounded in the Franciscan alternative orthodoxy, which is practices of contemplation and self-emptying, expressing itself in radical compassion, particularly for the socially marginalized. Father Richard is the author of numerous books and serves as academic dean of the Living School for Action and Contemplation. Drawing upon Christianity's place within the perennial tradition, the mission of the Living School is to produce compassionate and powerfully learned individuals who will work for positive change in the world based on awareness of our common union with God and with all beings. During this precious time with Father Richard, all of us have been reminded of what is most important about being human and what we need to remember in order to live lives of authenticity, meaning, and purpose. Whether we are in the first half of our lives or the second, or perhaps transitioning, which is indeed a lifelong challenge, we will leave from this precious time here with Father Richard more peaceful and more loving if we have indeed internalized the wisdom that Father Richard has so eloquently and heartfully shared with us. May we all say a fervent, may it be so. Father Richard, we are blessed beyond expression by your time and your presence with us. May we all bless you with our eternal gratitude and sincere love. The title of Father Rohr's lecture today is The Second Half of Life. You will be pleased to know that Father Richard will be doing a book signing today at the Hall of Missions on the porch immediately following his lecture, and that his books, what is left of them, will be sold out as well. We are grateful to the Eileen and Warren Martin Lectureship for emerging studies in Bible and theology, and for their endowment, which sponsors the Interfaith Lecture Series throughout this week with Father Richard. So now, please, let's give another very warm welcome to Father Richard Rohr, and let's hear the roar all the way from Smith Wilkes and the Hall of Christ and around the country.
Thank you. What did I do to deserve this? Really, all this in heaven too. Well, you have been sincerely a delight to be here. It's a delight to be among mature people. Where that is not the norm anymore. I don't think. It doesn't appear to be. So, I guess I have to start by saying, how can I talk? I'm not sure. I've earned the right to talk about the second half of life, but I have to try, or I couldn't have written the book, or the book wouldn't have come to completion. But you notice it's the smallest section of the book, because I've talked to some hospice workers, and end-of-life care people, and they really say a lot of people don't get it till the last 3 days, 3 hours, even 3 minutes. But the good thing, at least I've heard consistently, is most people do get it. What it means and what it doesn't mean. Because then you have no choice except to go for broke, huh? The great surrender called death. At the beginning of chapter 12, I start with a quote from the Dalai Lama. And he says, I think he probably is quoting others who've said the same thing. Learn and obey the rules very well, so you will know how to break them properly. That's at the heart of the matter. Did I finish my story the other day about the loyal soldier in Japan? That they had to discharge him? Yeah, I don't think I did very well, but it's a good example of knowing the rules and then knowing, they don't apply anymore. And knowing how to move beyond them to what works. It really is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I have to believe that the work of the Spirit, the work of the church should have been, and often has been, to lead us to wisdom. But it's more been a catechetical course in knowledge, information. And information of itself can't get you there. What wisdom is, one of the many wonderful definitions, is to know when the knowledge applies and when it doesn't. And you know what that is? It's mercy. It's compassion. It's understanding. And yet people who are still at the knowledge stage or law stage, they're almost the same. They'll hate you for it because you'll look like you're coloring outside the lines. Now, there is such a thing as just coloring outside the lines. I'm not talking about creating rebels, but people who know the rules well enough to know when they don't apply. That has to be a good judge. It should be a good confessor. It's pretty clear in both Jesus and Paul, who, it's amazing that we created a law and order religion out of two people who didn't have much good to say about law. You do know that, don't you? I mean, Jesus goes on and on. The law says, I say. The law says, I say. The law is first half of life. Compare, to put it simply for most of us, the 10 Commandments to the 8 Beatitudes. They're night and day. I'm not going to throw out the 10 Commandments, but I don't meditate on them very much, if at all. I got that with my parents in the first half of life. Now, the trouble we're facing now is a whole bunch of people didn't. I don't know if anybody here is from Texas. It's my time to pick on Texas. They're right next to us, down there. And if you've been to any Texas courthouse city, they always on the courthouse grounds have the 10 Commandments. There they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I asked, I really did, I'm not making this up for the sake of a good talk, the people who were giving me the tour, I said, have you ever seen a Texas courthouse that has the 8 Beatitudes? Well, no. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. See, that's a huge leap in consciousness. It's about 10 levels of maturing before you can really even assent to the 8 Beatitudes as having any level of truth. Now, what we're dealing with in our society and most of Western countries, developed countries, is that people, and I'm going to give you an arbitrary date, don't make a commandment out of this, but 1968 is usually the date we chart moving from modernism to postmodernism. Modernism told us that by getting educated and following the rules, we would save the world. And so we Catholics put all our money into Catholic schools. Educate, educate, educate. Thank God I couldn't be talking to you now if I wasn't given one of those wonderful educations. But then after 68, when we saw that all this education and all this religion and all this law and all this knowledge, it was countries with just such that produced the 2 world wars and the Holocaust. And so what our youngers did in great part is throughout the whole thing. If there's no order that works, let's just live with disorder. So we moved into a world of disorder after 1968. And any of you who were formed, you young ones, after that, you didn't know that's what you were being raised in, but you were. You couldn't assert anything to be always true or even usually true. There's nothing worse to say on a college campus. You'll be taken up immediately or taken down immediately. There are no meta-narratives, to use the big phrase. And here now, you're going to hear me talking out of 2 sides of my mouth, because they're in part right. That's what the prophets said. They attacked the priesthood and the lawgivers, and those were the ones who killed Jesus to show us forever how wrong power can be. And so we finally came to that in secular society. I'm just going to call it critical consciousness. Those of you who are old enough, we didn't have critical consciousness in the 40s and 50s. We didn't. We all liked Ike, and that's okay. It's all right. I lived in Kansas, right down the road, There was no such thing as conservatism as we now think of it. We were all conservative. It was a little kinder, I might say. But we all loved America and loved our churches and filled our churches and obeyed our parents, sort of. It held together. It's what spiral dynamics calls the blue level of consciousness. It's a rather happy level. But it only works if everything is homogeneous. Once the homogeneity of a culture or a country begins to break down, the blue level falls apart. Right? And that's what's been happening ever since 1968. Didn't just start with this president. It's in major deconstruction now, and that's the word that's used, where there are no absolutes, there are no normals even. There's just whatever the ego wants to do minute by minute by minute. So in our living school, I teach the students, and it's going to sound almost childish to some of you, but stay with me, it won't, I don't think, at the end. I want you to picture 3 boxes. The first box I'm going to call order. That's the normal conservative 1950s law-abiding, church-going worldview. There is a meaning, I'm a part of it, and I'm going to defend it. And it makes very happy people, doesn't produce a high degree of mental illness, because the mind does need coherence, some degree of coherence. The second box we're going to call disorder. Disorder emerged with a vengeance in the mid-1960s. where America, that thought of itself as a non-militaristic country through the Vietnam War, had to say, oh my God, we're militaristic too. And that's only grown in perception. Although the more it tries to emerge, the more the voices of denial and repression will also emerge. We thought we were a fairly equal opportunity country, and thank God we initiated our war against poverty to try to help those who are at the bottom of the ladder. We recognize that America's original sin, which continues to this day, is racism, and we had our wonderful and necessary civil rights movement. Most of us didn't know, particularly if you lived in the North, not that we didn't participate in it. What's called Reconstruction was pretty much just reconstructing everything that we thought the Civil War undid. Now, the black people knew that. We didn't know it, though. They got their freedom. They got their freedom. Yeah. See, there's a whole bunch of things you don't know when you're the beneficiaries of the system. But at any rate, all of this became exposed and created after 68, the arbitrary year, a very cynical attitude about authority, about law, about elders, about even the possibility of truth. It just doesn't exist. And I'm sure that's been the hardship many of you have had to go through in raising your own children and grandchildren. The same assumptions aren't there that we sort of probably naively took for granted. Now, what it means today to be called a conservative is anyone who tries to keep shoring up the first box, order at all costs. All evidence to the contrary, we were right, it was true, our absolutes are the only absolutes. It shows itself in every culture, not just ours. People we would call progressives or liberals tend to be trapped without knowing it in box 2. Perpetual deconstruction, perpetual cynicism, not you. And I mean that in great part because most of you, it appears, are believers. That gave you some absolutes to hold on to. But if you threw those out too, the only absolute remaining was your own ego. And you became the frame of reference, you became the chooser, you became the decider, according to your comfort and convenience and so forth. Now there's a third box, and I call that, naturally, reorder. So here's what the second half of life, it seems to me, is most easily described as, where you hold on to what's good and essential from the first box. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't overreact. You're not a rebel. You're not an iconoclast. You're not a libertarian in the bad sense. There's a good sense, too. That's the trouble with words. It's always a good meaning and a bad meaning, and you got to clarify so much. So it's easier just to be black and white, as we see in our country. We don't like subtlety. Americans just don't like subtlety. At any rate, many who call themselves, well, forgive me, out in the West, we even call it East Coast intellectuals. I guess I'm in the middle of them right now. Are you terrible people? East Coast intellectuals, and those people who are all educated. There's great disdain from those who've stayed in the first box toward those who are ensconced in the second box. Now, here's precisely the definition of the third box. When you can put the two together, and they don't need to block one another out. The best of the traditional and the best of the progressive. Again, to get back to the Jewish prophets who modeled this, we called them radical traditionalists. They knew the tradition well enough to critique the present by the sources and the values and the documents of the tradition. That's the only way you can reform anything, by the way. I think it's why believe it or not, I'm still in good standing. I don't know how it happened, but because I've paid my dues, I know the rules, I'm still a Franciscan. I did get investigated by the Vatican about 15 years ago. They sent me a whole list of my possible heresies. I answered each one in about a medium-sized paragraph, and then lived in anxiety for 4 months as I awaited the guillotine to come down on me. And I got this small paragraph, little letter from some Italian cardinal. You have answered all of our questions to our satisfaction. Continue to preach the gospel. See, this is a good thing about being Catholic. If you get authority on your side, they can't touch you. You poor Protestant ministers are much more exposed, you know. Just a little program or something has to go around the parish, and you can be judged to be a heretic. So I had to learn the rules well enough. And what the Franciscans gave me was historical theology. I hope you've heard a hint of it here, where they didn't just teach me the conclusions of the Council of Trent, which was highly reactionary, or even the 20th century consensus, but the history of how we got to every single doctrine, century by century. And then in every case, you know it wasn't always that way. Do know that, Catholics. It wasn't always this way. They like to make you think it was, but it wasn't. Just wasn't. The historical documents are there. But the conservative wants to pretend the Latin Mass fell from a glad bag in heaven. I'd love to tell them Latin was the language of Jesus' oppressors. Why would you want to speak Latin? Although I had to learn it, but history just turns itself on its head again and again. And if you did a historical theology of your denomination, I bet you'd find the same things. I hope you historians are loving it, but I do mean it. History, good history, is an immense liberation. An immense liberation from the present. And I think one reason we're in this crisis, and it is because Americans have little use for history, little knowledge of history. I don't want to offend these particular states, but I've had letters in the last year that really seem to think Christianity began in one case in Alabama and another case in South Carolina. Isn't that wonderful? Oh my God. It's just, what would the first millennium say about that? What they let pass for Christianity, which emerged from slaveholder religion, by the way, would be unrecognizable to the first 1,000 years as the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm not trying to say God doesn't love them. I'm not saying they're not good people, but the agenda they're working with is so limited. So what's the agenda we're moving toward? That term I used, if you want to pursue it further, spiral dynamics, Ken Wilber's school calls it integral theory. And what happened about 20 years ago, maybe 25 now, is scholars put together all of these different schools of developmental psychology. Piaget, Fowler, Kohlberg, Erik Erikson, Carol Gilligan, Ken Wilber himself, and they overlaid them, and they said, they're saying the same thing. There is a common consensus on the direction of a mature person. And that's what I'm calling here the second half of life. If you grow up without major dysfunction, major violence, major disillusionment, you will become less violent, more non-dual, more compassionate, and more inclusive. If you stay toward the bottom of the schema, you are more exclusive. Tribal is the word they usually use. You really think that might makes right, and violence will solve all problems. Power will solve all problems. So they put all these schemas together, and the common word used today is, you can Google it with this anyway, is spiral dynamics. But even that term, spiral, was brilliantly chosen because it shows that it's not a straight line. You get it, you lose it, you get it, you lose it, you get it, you lose it. Do you know, certainly if you come to New Mexico and look at our petroglyphs on the rock faces, the most common petroglyph, not just there, but I'm told all over the world, is the spiral. And the fact that the spiral is so consistently found in the artwork of the ancients tells us that they were somehow seeing, it seems to me, this is the nature of reality. Now, most of us were given instead the Western philosophy of progress. Everything's getting better and better and better. Now, I was also raised, as I bet a lot of you were, on Hegel's method or explanation called thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It made a lot of sense, and it still does. And your job is to balance out somehow the thesis with the antithesis, and that will lead you to a new synthesis. Well, we've learned something better by Cynthia Bourgeot, the Anglican woman priest in our school. And she learned it. I know this is going to start sounding esoteric and scary, but it isn't. Something just a little more subtle and a little wiser. From Gurdjieff, the Russian mystic, she learned, and I'm going to use this to try to explain the second half of life, what she calls third force thinking. Here it is, in a very abbreviated form, but you're those East Coast intellectuals, so you'll figure it out. Whenever there's a new arising of consciousness, Gurdjieff says, a new quasi-consensus about how things are. Take the French Revolution, 1789. He said, as certain as the dawn, he calls that holy arising. There will be holy denial. Now, he calls it holy. Hold on to that. There will be pushback against it. And I hope this helps us understand what we're in the middle of right now. Holy denial. I mean, Napoleon in 1800, after the liberty and equality and fraternity, we have an emperor again. 11 years later, that's pushback. After the Second Vatican Council ending in the mid-60s, we have, let's be honest, two popes who barely agreed with it. It opened the doors a little too much. That's why poor Pope Francis has to carry the brunt and the weight that he does today. So, holy affirming, holy pushback, holy denial. Here's the rub. Then Gurdjieff says, you have to wait for holy reconciling. And he describes it as sort of a X-force. We would call it in the Christian world grace. you can't manufacture it. You can't totally create it. It comes, it's a creatio ex nihilo. It's a gift from God, a new person, a new, utterly not idea, a new idea from nowhere. A new consensus that feels like it fell from heaven. And we're in that period of waiting for the X factor. We don't have it yet. And in this time of darkness, it feels like there's not a lot of hope. The only people who will be able to have it, they don't need to have my explanations, but are people who are somehow held by grace in this unique space, where I don't have to have an answer for everything, where knowing is balanced by unknowing, which, by the way, is the core meaning of faith, where I don't need to know, I don't need to be certain, I don't need to be right. Once you lose that, you get a lot of arrogant people who have to be right, who have to be certain, who have to know. Like Pope Francis himself, where did he come from? I know Argentina, but that's too obvious. I mean, have you seen those curmudgeonly cardinals? They voted for him. They could all shoot themselves now, you know. What did we do? So I guess God gave us Catholics that, although a lot of Protestants like him more than the Catholics do, to give us some hope in this dark time, because he clearly represents a higher level of consciousness, just like a Nelson Mandela or a Cesar Chavez or any of those who opened the door. And that's holy reconciling. A new idea that begins to be broadly received. And get ready, holy reconciling, according to Gurdjieff, if you want to believe him, becomes the new holy affirming. And we start all over again. That's the spiral. It's not a straight line. It's 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward, 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward. That's not hard to believe if you read history. We never get it and perpetually hold on to it. We just always lose it again and again and again. And then there needs to be a new arising, a new consensus. But it always moves toward inclusivity, toward nonviolence. It moves toward a worldview where we don't have to be imperial and right to be happy. But it's usually a minority position, as the gospel probably always will be. And one of you brought up the metaphor of leaven the other day. I think that's what we're talking about. Don't wait for Christendom. I don't think it's going to happen. But there's always going to be people like you that I can talk to and others can talk to in this way, and you're not panicking and running out of the room. Because to some degree, whether you know it or not, you've attained non-dual consciousness, where you can hold 2 contraries, where you can hold 2 opposing forces, like Jesus on the cross, where you can live with contradictions. It's almost a definition of maturity. If you've ever worked with what they used to call them, maybe they still do, dry drunks. They've stopped drinking, but they're still horrible to live with because they're so absolutist in their thinking. It's all or nothing thinking. I'd become an addict too. You're miserable if you're an all or nothing thinker, because there's always something to be upset about. Someone is always wrong. Someone has to be killed in its extreme forms. So we've been given something, almost the geometric image of the cross, that gave us freedom to move beyond it. Let me end with what I end the book with, and that'll leave us, I hope, enough time for your questions. And of course, it had to be a quote or a poem from Thomas Merton. He died in 1968, Robert Kennedy was killed in 1968, and Martin Luther King was killed in 1968. The death of three such huge possibility thinkers is symbolically what collapsed us into the nihilism we have today. We're going to kill all the prophets. Of course, Jesus said that. He said, you killed all the prophets, and you're going to kill me. Because a prophet, by definition, sees, as I think it's Abraham Heschel says, sees everything an octave higher. And those of us who don't read reality an octave higher, we're always threatened by high-level consciousness. They look like heretics. They look wrong. They look like sinners. They look dangerous. Well, anyway, I had read this particular poem when I was able to, I gave the retreat to the Trappists in Gethsemane in 1985, and the abbot asked what he could give me for payment. I said, well, I don't need any money, but I'd sure like to do a hermitage in Merton's Hermitage. So he gave it to me for a month. Springtime in Kentucky, how beautiful it was. And the poem I opened to in his own book of his own poems was entitled, When in the Soul of the Serene Disciple. This is the best I can do to describe the second half of life. When in the soul of the serene disciple, with no more fathers to imitate, authority figures, people who are absolutely right and always right, you lose the need for that. You don't need to rebel against fathers, but neither do you need to be on bended knee before them. Can you find the middle position? Yeah. Most people are one or the other. They need to hate them or they need to worship them. With no more fathers to imitate, poverty is a success. And he's not just talking about physical, material poverty, but what Jesus is referring to in the first beatitude. Poverty is a success. Poverty of spirit, where I don't need to be right. I don't need to win. I don't need to make more money. I don't need to oppress anybody else so I can be right. It's a small thing to say the roof is gone. You don't even have a house. Stars as well as friends are angry with the noble ruin. He's lost faith. So many I've just been sure and delighted over the years that I lost faith. And I thought Mother Teresa lost faith too. Saints depart in all directions from such people because they live with ambiguity. They can live with darkness. They can live with otherness. They've learned the rules well enough to know how to break the rules. I hope you've had at least one pastor in your life like that. Sweet old Irishman, you know? We had Father Flanagan. Be still. There's no longer any need of comment. It was a lucky wind that blew away your halo with your cares. You don't need to appear holy. St. Philip Neri used to walk through the streets of Rome when they called him a saint with a bottle of booze in one hand, and told dirty jokes. So they'd stop calling him a saint. I know a few Franciscans who do the same. It was a lucky wind that blew away his halo with his cares, a lucky sea that drowned his reputation. Once you have a reputation, you got to live up to it. It's a trap. It's a prison. That's why I can't dress up in the right clothes all the time. I love my brown robe. The Italian ladies kiss my hand, and I look like St. Anthony. I can't go there because I'm not St. Anthony. I'm Richard. Here you will find neither a proverb nor a memorandum. There are no ways, no methods to admire. Poverty is no achievement. Your God now lives in your emptiness like an affliction. In your emptiness. It sounds almost Buddhist. Well, it is. What choice remains? Well, to be ordinary is not a choice. It's the usual freedom of men without their visions. The young zealot, and I was one, is the young man with his visions. The gospel isn't really idealism. It's utter, absolute realism. If you don't get that message from the crucified, this is realism. This is where life leads you, sooner or later. There's not idealism there. We tried to make it into that because we like a happily ever after story. Now, it does become that, of course. But as I told you, we're at morning prayer, we didn't get the resurrection. It was only about Jesus. It wasn't about us, which it clearly is. So I hope whatever I've tried to say these days is about resurrection, is about a second half of life that you don't create, you don't manufacture, you don't figure out. You just drop into it. Just stay out of the way. Don't take yourselves too seriously. Make sure you can laugh. Now, people usually stop there. I mean, laugh at yourself and let other people laugh at you. There's a certain head of state that I've never seen laugh. Really? And allows no one to laugh at him. That's pretty much a sign that it's not his fault, I guess. I don't know what his story is, but he never got it. What it is to be a mensch, as the Jewish people say, a human being, one who can hold together all the contraries, all the paradoxes, all the mysteries, even without understanding them. Thank you. Aren't you?
So building on that wisdom that you've shared with us now for 4 days, we have some more but few precious minutes to share a conversation with you, Father Richard. And so we're starting to line up, and I wonder if we'll ever get to all the questions that people are carrying with them.
My answer is shorter. Yeah.
So we're going to start out with a question from the Hall of Christ. And it's a very short question because it's something about which you have been speaking all week. But I think the questioner is asking for a dictionary definition, which is short. So the questioner asks, what is your dictionary definition of reality?
Well, I'm going to come at it the other side. I say it in the Universal Christ book, I think, that the word God is reality with a face. Now stay with that. Don't throw it out too quick. When you give reality a face that you can enter into conversation with and love with, that's God. So I guess reality is God. Yeah. Okay, next.
Excellent definition. So let's go from one side to the other, and we'll start with this side on the left, and we'll have very short questions.
There and short answers, I hope.
Thank you very much, Father Richard. Today's talk blew me away as I'm a former altar boy who graduated from a Franciscan high school in 1968 and afterwards became a radical hippie with complete chaos, and I pursued Buddhism all my life and have only returned to a Christian understanding with reading you and Matthew Fox and other more, let us say, progressive understandings of the Christ. My question is, I have a friend who loses his temper when he is dealing with talking to his friends and being faced with support for tyranny and oppression that we're seeing prevalent in our current political situation. And I'd like to get some advice on how to really be non-dual about it and to not get into afflictive emotions when you're dealing with friends and family and there's this disparity of perspective.
Well, we're all struggling with that. I get the question in some form at every gathering. How are we supposed to talk now? Just know that a face-to-face oppositional only evokes more of the same, because you paint someone without meaning to in a corner, and then they have to come back reasserting their position. So the most gently you can state, without humiliating the other, the phrase I have found myself using the most often is, and I try to say it slowly and quietly, well, I have to think about that. That's all. It stops the momentum that they almost want to bait you with, and you're saying, in effect, I'm not going to buy the bait. Because dualistic thinking only leads to more dualistic thinking. So if you can somehow just express some kind of doubt, that I have to give that a little more prayer, a little more time, a little more thought. That's the best way I know how to enter in to the nature of conversations today. I hope that helps a bit. I know it's not complete.
And
Yeah.
we'll turn to the other side.
You seem to get up here every day, don't you?
Yeah. Abba Dicky, thank you for
You're welcome.
your grace and presence. You talked about letting go yesterday as a component of separating from yourself to see the humanity and the oneness in others. But oftentimes this is difficult. Upon entering the depths of ourselves, we see things through our true self lens. We see things in their rawness, in which there's so much beauty, but also so much difficulties and pain, which is for many possibly why we avoid going there in the first place, consciously or unconsciously. You also suggested yesterday that before the truth sets us free, that it tends to make us miserable. And told us how part of the men's initiation rites of the Messiah warriors required them to weep for the suffering of the world. Yeah.
All right, what's your question?
My question is this, with that context. For myself and for others listening who care deeply about the downtrodden, who stand in solidarity with the poor, and who want to help the marginalized communities, thank you for your patience. What could you suggest to us that will help us to let go, so that while in our quiet moments, in feeling so deeply for the pain and suffering of the world, we don't allow ourselves to get dragged down into the pits of sadness by the weight that surrounds the reality of life's suffering?
I'm just going to say, gaze upon the crucified a long time. And you'll know that he said it's always been this way. That doesn't mean you don't work to change it. But before you can say no to reality, you first must say a radical foundational yes. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
With all the information that's crammed into that wonderful head of yours, we Eastern intellectuals will gladly welcome you into our club. In the meantime, Ken Wilber says that consciousness always keeps growing, but it can be slowed down. And in the 60s, narcissism basically started to slow down the growth of consciousness. And I think we're still in that. My question is, how do you see that growth of consciousness speeding up?
I really do see a lot of examples of it. The amount of creativity is just overwhelming. I was invited about 3 years ago to speak to the leadership team at Google out on the West Coast. There's smart people out there, too. I mean, even the fact that they would ask a Catholic priest, this is a different arena. This is a different realm. Our own staff in Albuquerque, we have almost 50 people. Jim, my assistant's son, is one of them. And they're millennials, half of them millennials. They don't have my work ethic. Let me say that, first of all. They come in at 9:30 and they have their latte. And they're already leaving at 3:30. But the things they turn out, it's just different. It's a whole different focus. What I realize is they do a lot of their work at home on screens because they can do that. And the job always appears to get done. But we're seeing that in so many areas. I mean, just the amount of books that are pouring out. I don't know how Barnes & Noble keeps up with all the books, you know, the study of eggplants. There's a book on everything. So the Holy Reconciling is emerging of very creative human beings. And many Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Lutheran mystic which the Catholic Church would canonize, he said we're entering into a period of religionless Christianity. And these very same millennials on the staff, I don't know how many of them go to church. I have a feeling not many. But they love what I'm saying. I don't know why. And they love the gospel in a very different way than we did. It's really not about worshiping Jesus for them. It's about following Jesus. This is a whole different... And we put way too much effort and energy into the correct worship form, which only divided us. This is the way the Methodists do it. This is the way the Catholics do it. This is the way the Presbyterians do it. Who cares, really? With what we're up against now, with the state of the planet, we don't have time to argue about worship services, you know? We really don't. You know? Now, I say that after delighting in what we're doing here each morning at 9 o'clock. Wow, good prayers, good music. So when it's done right, it's still wonderful, and I don't think it'll ever go out of fashion. We need it to congeal our hearts and our minds and our community. But a new kind of creativity and courage is imagining. My generation did not have courage to not go to church on Sunday. And I use that word intentionally, all right? They do. You can call it wrong if you want, but I just see an awful lot of them caring about the poor's water in Nicaragua. Do you understand? And I didn't even know about Nicaragua, much less that they didn't have water. This is the work of God. Yeah, thank you.
Father, on the right.
Hello, Father Richard. I'm David from Virginia, just another one of the East Coast intellectuals. My question for you is, are you aware of the suggestion by some that the violence that we think is occurring in our society today is an illusion brought about by the media? That the reality is the percentage of human beings living at peace together in the world today is greater than at any other time in human history.
Yes. Yes. And what did you want me to say to that? You heard it.
I wanted to know whether you heard of it and agreed.
Yeah, it's the lowest it's ever been. Oh, okay, yeah, might as well. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned about violence, and I know you weren't saying that. Yeah, okay. Yes.
Hi, Father. My question goes a little bit back to what you were just asking or talking to a minute ago. My husband is a minister, and we've served in churches from small mining towns in Minnesota to inner city St. Louis. And one thing we have heard consistently from these aging congregations is they want us to bring in young families, they want us to bring in children. And our obstacle is also the opposite side of that, that the elders of congregations, not all, of course, but many, don't want to deal with the noise and the nuisance and the mess of that first half generation. And so my question is, how can we find a way to address the open hostility to having, you know, the first half in our congregations and get people to show up to intergenerational things and inspire our elders to take the place that we need them to have in our communities?
All right. Now, you're going to hate me for this. But strictly speaking, little ones are not in the first half of life.
Okay.
They're little lovable animals. You understand? And we all love.
Not all.
Not all. But I know what you're saying. Well, I think we have to grant the older generation space, but if they are truly second half of life people, not just chronologically, but really, soulfully, then they're going to be the first to understand the necessity of the extended family, and that the extended family is the nature of the church. Now, that doesn't mean they can't have different classes or be in different rooms and so forth. But, yeah, it is bothersome very often how older people are so bothered by the noise of children. That's not so good on their part. But how do you teach them? That tells me they're elderly, but they're not elders yet. Yeah. But they have to know that you are doing something to protect their quiet time too, or their quiet space, or their quiet room. Not all the time, but once in a while. Okay? I wish I could give you a better answer.
So, Father, we have a question from Smith Wilkes Hall. We're happy to have them with us today. And the questioner says, I practice neutrality. However, are some things right or wrong?
Yes. Yes. Now, stay with me. You first have to succeed at dualistic clarity, all right? You first have to know this is good, this is not good. Now, that doesn't mean you hold to that in a hateful way or a declarative, judicious way, but we're not one to teach you fuzzy thinking, all right? And that's what a lot of people think progressive people are, fuzzy thinkers. First, you succeed, I said a form of this yesterday, at dualistic clarity. And then you wait till you can find a mature, non-dual, compassionate, patient, understanding response before you speak. Which might mean very often you don't speak, because it takes a while to get there. For those of you who know the Enneagram, I'm a 1, and my capital sin is anger, resentment. And when people say things that are just absolutely stupid, oh God, I have to bite my tongue. Do you understand? But I've learned how to do it, I really have. And we all have to learn how to do it. It doesn't help to pour gasoline on the fire. So, as I thought I said yesterday, if I'm going to say dualistic thinking is wrong, then I'm dualistic. No, we need both, dual and non-dual. Start with dual clarity, or we end up with this fuzzy thinking that says both sides in Charlottesville were the same. That's not where we want to go, okay? So people will misuse it. Yeah. Does that help a little?
Father to the right.
Bless you, Father, for your insights and inspiration. My name's Erin McCarty. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. And my husband died yesterday. And I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to honor the memory and legacy of a loved one without becoming trapped in the past and in nostalgia and regrets.
Well, first of all, I'm surprised you're here today. What made you think you should come here today? And I mean that sincerely.
I had planned on, if I could figure out a way to get here, I had hoped to get here this week because I have been as a student of yours for many years.
I see.
And I thought with the topics you're speaking to, this seemed more appropriate.
Would be helpful to
Yes.
this. Okay. Grief is the emotion that has the most mystery and depth to it, because you can't normally blame anybody. You'll try, your mind will try to blame somebody who caused, and maybe someone did cause your husband's death. But that's why Job, sitting on the dung heap, picking at his sores, is almost the symbol of someone at grief. You just have to wade through it, and time and quiet is of the essence. And journaling maybe, reading maybe, but don't fill the next weeks with crowds like this. This is not where you want to be. And I know you're going to feel lonely. I hope you have some support.
I do.
Yeah, okay, well, good. Draw upon that, but you're going to be drawn into a kind of aloneness that has the potential to be very enriching over months, not even days and weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm Dick Rodriguez from Fredonia, New York, and you opened the door to my question. How does the Enneagram correspond to the transition from our first half of life to our second half of life?
Well, the first thought that comes to my mind is it tells us that there's at least 9 different ways to make that transition. And there will be 9 different patterns. We ones will try to fix it and make it right and do it perfectly. So maybe just knowing that. The 2 will try to help other people to avoid, oh, that's what you are. To avoid moving to helping themselves. Really. They'll work down at the soup kitchen instead of helping themselves. So just knowing what I still continue, although they don't perfectly correlate, call the capital sins. We all, in moments of stress and hunger and tiredness, what do the alcoholics say? You know what I'm talking about. We all go back to our home base. And there we become compulsive, doing more and more of the thing that does not work. So if you're lucky enough to know that you're a 2, just watch for any, in your case, excessive helping and caring and what can even become busybody, making yourself necessary in other people's lives. But it does come from a good heart. Please believe that. You do want to help. You've got a heart of love. But it can also be an avoiding of your own journey. Yeah. Thank you.
Father, we have 4 minutes. And
All right, 4
maybe
minutes.
only one question. We'll see.
Who over here?
Yes, to the right.
Yes, Father. I was Catholic all my life, Catholic grade school,
Raise it up. Raise it up. There you go.
Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, Catholic college. Every step of the way in being a Catholic, reaching for what you're trying to give us today was put down. It's a mystery. Don't go there. Don't go there. Stay in the box. And my question is, I feel like I have an idea of what you found and what you're trying to tell us. How did you find it in the Catholic Church?
In 3 minutes.
Well, you know, for me it's easy because I get to create the context. And that's probably one of the reasons women rightly want to become priests. When I get to create the context, it's easy for me to be Catholic. But just know that the Catholic Church is a breadth from far left to far right more than any church I know. Now, that might not be your experience at your local parish. And now I guess I enjoy, if that's the right word, I enjoy a certain seniority. They're hoping I'll be gone soon. But the other thing is the protection of the Franciscans. What you might, even as a Catholic, not know, were you educated by any religious order?
Not the Franciscans, but the...
Microphone.
You got to speak in the mic. Oh, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter which group it was. The Catholic Church, to most people, looks like a giant pyramid. Pope, cardinals, archbishops, bishops, deacons. It's just, when you really get inside of it, it's surrounded by what we call religious orders, who are satellites of immense freedom. Sisters of Charity, Sisters of Providence, Jesuits, Benedict. We sort of do our own thing, if you'd really want to know.
Mine was Jesuits.
Yours was Jesuits, yeah, okay. You know, I don't think well, no, we do have a picture of Pope Francis now. But the previous 2 popes, don't hate me, but we didn't have a picture of them. We had plenty of pictures of Clare and Francis. Do you understand? Our gospel storyline is very different. And I came, first of all, to be a Franciscan before I came to be a priest. It makes priests from religious orders very often, not always, considerably different and considerably more broad-minded, because we're not really trained to be sacrament priests. When your job is just to keep doing the sacraments, you tend, it's a built-in problem. You tend to become juridical, to control the doorways of coming into the church. I don't suffer from that, but that's no credit to me. The Franciscans have always defended me. Let me end with one story. A provincial is the head of a province, And every new bishop we've had in Santa Fe has tried to plant a wedge between me and the Franciscans. He usually corners them in the sacristy after confirmation. And this particular provincial was a Hispanic, brilliant man, and he shouldered up to him and he said, "Is your office getting the same complaints our office is getting about Father Richard's preaching?" And without skipping a beat, he says, "Actually, we get more complaints about yours than we do." So when you're protected by, see, a provincial has the equality of a bishop. They can't touch us the way poor diocesan priests, parish priests, have a much harder time. They really do. So for me, it's easy. I get to enjoy the breadth of Catholic philosophy, theology, and history, and art, and culture. And that's good. Don't throw that away easily.
Thank you.
You're
You're here.
welcome.
So, Father Richard, we have a question that came from the Hall of Christ that we're not going to let you answer because, first of all, we don't have time. And secondly, I would like you to come back and spend a lot more time on this question. And the questioner wanted you to say more about mysticism and the perennial traditions. That would take a lot of time, and we're going to hope that he can come back and do that with us. So some of you may still have the blessing of being with Father tomorrow morning. Those of us who have walked this journey with you through these 4 afternoons will be forever grateful. We will hold you in our hearts, and we will keep on learning and listening. And we thank you